It's a work session. It's open to the public. So why did you talk about that?
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, hot mic, hot mic.
Hey Doug, can you hear us? Yeah. Yeah. I'm not staying here, I'm gonna be here permanently. Just forgot to get back so I can let it on mute.
Are you ready, Madam President?
7:52. Hey Doug, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I'm here. I can hear you.
Okay, make sure you mute yourself, because you have a little echo coming through and hear a little bit of something come through.
Okay, hang on just a second.
Perfect. Oh, sorry. You can mute yourself.
I am muted. Oh, muted, sorry. There we go, sorry.
Perfect, thank you. You let that give me a heart attack.
Yeah, I would like
All right, everybody, we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Members of the board and members of the community, the work session emphasis this evening will be proposing and conversation regarding the repurposing of Hawthorne Elementary School. And our goal in having this conversation is to develop a plan to best utilize our resources and our staffing for student success. So why are we looking at this particular issue? So over the past several years, while in the count that we had right before the pandemic in 2020, we had a slight uptick in our enrollment compared to prior count days, we still have an issue of declining enrollment. Like many other urban districts, through the past couple of years during the pandemic, we've seen declining enrollment. And at the same time, we have the same number of facilities that we had in operation for that smaller number of students. So then we have to ask ourselves, how do we best utilize our financial resources and utilize those buildings for the benefit of students? And then, as we've seen over the past several years, staffing within public schools has become more and more challenging as people have chosen not to go into the teaching profession. And that has been exacerbated or made worse by what's happened, particularly over the last year. So this proposal is to repurpose Hawthorne Elementary into a pre-K and community hub concentrating on kindergarten readiness and support for families. So the proposal, as we're putting this forward and we will be exploring over the next week, would be for us to move the K through 6, the kindergarten through grade 6 students at Hawthorne Elementary to other schools and realign staff to go where those students would go as we would increase sections in other buildings. The second piece would be is that since students would be going to classrooms at Mary Beck Elementary, we would look to relocate those pre-K classrooms at Mary Beck into a cluster of classrooms on the newer portions, in the newer portions of Hawthorne Elementary on the backside, and then look for ways as we would go forward to expand pre-K offerings as funds and partnerships would become available. The third piece would be to provide a community hub of services at the Hawthorne site. So one of the things that we would do is we would put a satellite office of our student services department over there so that people would be able to register or do things with things related to student services from within that building and not have to come over to the Rice Center. The potential for community-based health clinics, other community partners or agencies to support children, and to be looking at that kindergarten readiness piece. And then finally, the last piece of this, those first parts all could be kind of considered a phase 1. The second part is to help us start looking at a phase 2. So we would want to issue a request for proposal or go out and ask vendors who would help us with a demographic and feasibility study to look at what's happening more broadly within our community, for us to be able to look at population trends over the next decade, what's our building utilization like more broadly across the district, what's the potential for further redistricting, and some of the conversations that had happened prior to my arrival here regarding change of grade configuration. So one of the things that people have mentioned before is, what about moving 6th graders to the middle school? So I really would like for us to be able to investigate and look seriously and in depth at what that means in terms of staffing and facility usage and those kind of things, since that's a conversation that's been happening in the community and we need to just really analyze what that would mean. Part of our rationale for this is our costs and our facilities. So in looking at building renovations, it simply does not make sense to renovate all of Hawthorne Elementary as a K-6 school for the age and portions of that building and for the cost. Parts of that building would be utilized for pre-K and these other services, but it wouldn't involve the same costs as running the entire school. The fall resolution that the board passed for us to look at 3 buildings, Monger, Daly, and Hawthorne, were to look at capital improvements and what does it make sense to do in those buildings. And as the team looked at that and looked at the needs of the building and realizing that, you know, the oldest portions of Hawthorne are from 1929, the costs and mechanicals and repairs and the things that are happening within that building are accumulating to where we have to be aware of that and be alert of what those costs would be. So board members, in front of you, there is a color-coded map that's there for you. The bright yellow portion is what runs along Lusher, and it's the north side of the building. The blue side is the south side of the building. So I had put this chart together, and then Mr. Gianesi thought it would be helpful for you to maybe be able to visualize this. So I've kind of color-coded this for you. So the yellow portions at the top of the map would be the original 1929 portion. Then the portion in green there is an addition of 4 classrooms across 2 stories that was added in 1955. Then in 1965, there were 6 classrooms added in the portion that's in the orange. In 1980, the pinkish part is the paint and cosmetic work, in addition to the large chunk there you see is the gym and the adjacent classrooms. Then directly across the building is a purple square. That's the cluster of the 4 kindergarten classrooms that were done in 1994. In 2004, cafeteria and the classrooms wrapping around the south side of the building, they're in blue. And then in 2015 and 2016, there was some paint, carpet, cosmetics, and finishes replaced in that front portion, the yellow portion, and the green and the orange. And then in 2016, there were new boilers. So now as we look at the building and what is needed, we kind of have 2 choices of directions to take. The first direction would be is if we would do a full K through 6 renovation of the mechanical systems and the cosmetic improvements that that building needs, we would be doing a $5 million bond issue that the district would be obligated to pay off over the next 20 years. And even with that $5 million to spend, given supply chain issues and costs and those kind of things, that may not be able to do everything that we would ideally like to do to the building, but we would be putting that money in there and then taking the building well over 100 years in its age by the time we would recoup what we've paid into that over those years of paying off that bond. The alternative that we're proposing is that we would spend just $1 million on a small general obligation bond that we pay back over 2 to 4 years to upgrade those pre-K spaces. So to be able to do cosmetically what's needed in those places, some carpet, the paint, those kind of things, working on an office and entrance on the back of the building, and to replace a chiller. And then we could investigate looking at bringing in community partners who would have spaces within there that they would renovate on their own, and they would offset the cost of utilities and custodial services based on the square footage that they occupy. Second rationale for this is our enrollment and our space. So we would have students moved from the district's oldest elementary building that are close to newer facilities and schools in the area that have space. Many of our buildings have space, and we would be able to reallocate them. So Mary Beck was built in 2002, Roosevelt STEAM Academy was built in 2006, and Mary Daly and Monger, due to those bond issues and the resolution of exploring what to do in those buildings, are undergoing improvements this coming year. This chart reflects what's happened in enrollment. So if you look at the far right, you see in 2016-17, just across the buildings there, Hawthorne and then Beck and Daly and Roosevelt, you can see that those buildings had, outside of Hawthorne having 414, those other buildings all had over 500 students in them, and they had substantial pre-K sizes. And then as you go to the left, you'll see that in 2017-18, Beck was reconfigured to where it was dropped to fewer sections of K through 6, and there were increased numbers of pre-K classrooms. And they have held fairly steady in their enrollment in that 240 to 45 range in that point. Daily during that time, you'll see, has dropped from the 575 high down to a 427. Hawthorne has gone from 414 to 530 and 570, and then has slipped down a little bit. And then Roosevelt was at 585 back in 2016-17 and is down to 457. So you can see that as we look at those buildings compared to what they held at one time, there is space for students, for those 493 students from Hawthorne, to be redistributed across those other buildings. The third rationale is our ability to relocate those pre-K and then have space to potentially expand. So the newer portions of Hawthorne facility contain rooms that are ready for pre-K, so those classrooms could be moved from Mary Beck. There are kindergarten rooms at Hawthorne in that pod, that purplish pod area there, in addition to a couple special education rooms that contain bathrooms and meet square footage requirements, and then other classrooms are near enough to restrooms to meet those needs. So currently, Hawthorne has pre-K classrooms just to the left of the gym there, a couple of classrooms with a restroom right by them. Beck has 6 Head Start classrooms and a title classroom, so those 7 classrooms could move over to the kindergarten pod, 2 other rooms, and then some of those other classrooms that are near enough to restrooms. So we would have the ability to move those pre-K classes over there, have that pre-K cluster, have those pre-K teachers be able to work together in a professional learning community, develop and professionally develop each other, and work as a team to meet the needs of our youngest learners. The final piece that I'm adding is the need for a feasibility study. So as we're talking about potential job growth in the county, people talk about the coming of the Amazon facility and those things, housing developments potentially, or housing policy changes. We need to have some professional experts to look at all of those changes that are on the horizon or potential changes on the horizon and help us determine if there is further repurposing or other work that needs to be done. So one of the other things that I've said is that prior to my arrival, there were conversations about condensing middle schools or moving sixth grades to middle schools. And when I would ask how much was that explored or really looked at, or what were the implications of that, people said that it wasn't really looked at in an intensive and systematic way. So I would like for that to be part of what we would do in the feasibility study. So this Hawthorne is a pretty clear and obvious case of something to do that we as a district staff can manage and can do now. However, when we want to look at those demographic changes, policy, all of those other issues, that's something where we need some outside experts to come and lay all that information in front of us so that I can work with the board to make the decisions about what happens in next steps based on our enrollment numbers, those demographic trends, and the things that we see in that data. So over the first couple of weeks of February, following this presentation, I will be doing this presentation at public meetings to explain the proposal and listen to concerns. At the February 8th board meeting, knowing that we would want to get a vendor out there to get to that feasibility study and begin that process so that we can start looking at phase 2, then I would ask that at the February 8th board meeting that we approve going to vendors and put out that request for proposal. In February, beginning those discussions with some community partners and examining the timeline of what we would do and how that would work. No commitments, nothing happening at this point, but opening those conversations to see who might be those valued partners that could be there with us. In February and March, look at redistricting boundaries and staffing needs and take staff requests where they'd like to be. In April, finalize those boundaries and the impacts on transportation and staffing. And our goal would be to have all staff and students assigned, reassigned, and families notified by the last day of school that people would know heading into summer where everyone's going to be. A couple things to highlight regarding savings, and I have Mr. Gianesi here with me. We've looked over these numbers and had conversations about them, and I'd be glad to answer questions about them in more detail as I conclude. When we talk about costs within a building, and you've heard Mr. Scott say this many, many times, costs within our building are driven by people. And so when we look at this, we obviously, looking at closing a building, we would not have a need for a principal. We're also looking that there would not need to be as many secretaries in that building, so there would be at least a secretary position reduced. And looking at how that building would be utilized with the pre-K program, we would be able to reduce a part-time custodian position. So those personnel savings, benefits, insurance, all those things would save us about $203,000. Things to keep in mind is that, again, that's a very conservative figure of a minimum of what we're looking at, and we would foresee many personnel following the students. So obviously, if we're moving students, we're going to need those teachers to follow those students into those other buildings and be available for them. Paraprofessionals would also, especially those assigned to particular students, would still need to be there. As we're looking at increasing enrollment in some other buildings, the assistant principal may need to go to another building, especially to help during the transition time. And then the question would be, as nurses and social workers, would they potentially be split across some buildings to help and provide some additional supports, or would they be allocated someplace else? Those would be questions we'd be looking at depending on how aggressive we would want to be regarding personnel changes. But at the very least, we'd be looking at that 203 number. And then, and from an operations standpoint, while a building is sitting there, we do have to keep some minimal set points in terms of heating and air conditioning, but the pieces that would not be utilized, and with as many students not going in and out of portions of the building, we would, at the very least, as a very conservative estimate, save about $20,000, but potentially more. And then looking at equipment, supplies, cleaning supplies, all those kind of things, Tony assumes a conservative estimate there would be about $9,000. So those things all put together get us to annual savings of $232,000, in that area of almost $250,000 that we would realize as savings annually, again, on a very minimal and conservative basis, depending on what other things we would decide to do. And having community partners in the building to help offset some of those costs in terms of utilities in other parts of the building, or to offset with custodial, would be some ways to increase that savings figure. So again, to stress the why, investing millions of dollars in a building for use as a full K-6 school isn't justified given our current enrollment and the available space in other schools. Consolidating students into fewer buildings allows for better staffing and collaboration, and it allows more classrooms at a grade level for meeting student needs. So we would have more teachers at a grade level and more classrooms at a grade level in order to distribute students, meet their needs, have teachers work in collaborative professional learning communities, all of those things. And then an important piece for us is that the proud history and the tradition of Hawthorne can be preserved by a site that is helping us meet the needs of our families and preparing students for the future and supporting them all along the way. And a few final takeaways I would want to stress is that all current staff members at Hawthorne will have a position within the district following this repurposing. So if someone is employed with us currently, they will still have a position after that. This was important as we went through the merger process, and this would be important here. Given the circumstances around our staffing and the age of the building, if a building from 1929 were located any place within the district, we would be having the same conversation. And third, the decision is purely driven by the factors of finances and staffing, and it is no way representative of a judgment or our reflection on the staff at Hawthorne who does amazing things for kids. This is where we have landed due to enrollment and finances and having a district that is simply not right-sized. And with that, I will take questions or comments from the board.
So, on this map, is the yellow and the orange the only parts that will be closed off so that we could utilize all this down here, the two purplish, pinkish, and the green, or is it the purplish, pinkish, and down?
If I may. So this is the 1929.
Right, that would be closed off.
55 and the 65. So this portion would be closed off, and the 80.
So can you say it so that we
Could
can
you
all
put
look at?
could you put the color code up there for us one more time so we can, because I was trying to do it, but it was a little fast. They're right, oops, that one.
Okay. So the original 29 section is the yellow at the top, the very top of the page.
Right here.
Yep. Excuse me. That portion would not be utilized for pre-K. The green, which is just to the bottom right, there's just two classrooms. It's actually a two-story. So remember, the original Hawthorne's two-story, and that piece is two-story. That would be part of the area that would not be used. And then the orange, which is on the left, there's 5 classrooms down the side, and it elves over to a 6. That's the 65 portion. So that half of the building, looking at the page, is the section we're suggesting we would not utilize for our pre-K. And then the purple, pink, and blue, those are the areas that would be utilized.
Would the yellow and green and orange, that would be the area that would be considered for the community partners?
Or other programs.
For other programs?
Yep.
Can you explain how the part that we're not gonna be using will be, I don't know, closed off, or how will that work?
So the way the building is set up, we cannot close it off completely due to fire code and exiting, but we could close off at the, there's sets of doorways that are between the purple and orange and the pink and green, and those doorways could be secured unless we have an emergency in the building that have to be utilized for exiting. But with what we're looking at with community partners, we're not as concerned. You know, if we were giving the space to an outside company,
Right.
that's a totally different concern. These are people that are supporting our students and our families. So as Dr. Tallheimer and I discussed earlier, the interesting thing about this building, if it's utilized this way, is that it's still a school building, So anyone that's in that building has to follow school guidelines. So fire alarms, storm drills, anything that we do in our section of the building, they would have to do as well. And I don't know if any of you were on the board when we talked about Pierre Moran years ago. That was one of the discussion items, is that when you put different uses in that building, everything still has to function based upon a school.
Doctor, with the city council doing a feasibility study, have we partnered with them on being able to, like, you know, step away from too much of an economical hit for us doing the feasibility study? I mean, since it's gonna be across the city, can't we piggyback with them and kind of utilize those funds to see the necessity? I mean, that kind of puts us in the place.
I could investigate that to see
Yeah.
what's within theirs that we
Right.
wouldn't necessarily replicate to some of the, if they have some of the demographic information and things that would be beneficial to us, then we could pull those pieces out of what we would do.
Okay.
I think things particular to grade reconfigurations and that kind of stuff that's more school specific, we would still need to do.
Right.
But I can look and see what,
Yeah, because I
how it
think if
overlaps
we
with
can
them.
kind of partner
Yeah.
with that, and also that would allow us to see, like, what the need for community partners would even be inside of this. So, so there's that, and then, and that would be prior to the February 8th board meeting. We would need to know that, because that could
Yep.
possibly cause a shift in the timeline at that point also. And when you talk about the community partners, and we've kind of discussed this, it's important to talk about that. We're not saying that that's a done deal, and we're just like looking at that, but we're placing the importance on education and our students and our staff first. So when looking at that, and you talk about the different employees, have we discussed what are we doing? Are these art teachers that are already split between schools? Our music teacher, where does our ELL teacher go? How about our librarian? I mean, where does she fit into the place? And when we talk about attrition, we know we'll need help with that assistant principal, but we also know that, we kind of have our buildings where they're at, where they need to be. So what happens to those employees that
So in
will not
terms,
have anything?
sure, in terms of what we'll do is we'll look at where student loads would shift and what sections will be added, and then we will take people's requests as to what's there and where we can put people. In terms of special teachers, we'll have conversations with them about where they are. In some instances, people may have the licensure that enables them to also teach a regular classroom, or we will have conversations and figure out where we can best fit.
And let me include physical education also.
Yeah.
So can you speak to how does this overlap or complement or whatever, what's going on in South Central with the Tolson project? Because there's a lot of money, time, effort, city money, philanthropy money, grant money, all going in to make Tolson the community hub of the South Side. So how does this conflict with that? What is?
No, our conversation and when I have just talked in general about what's happening across the South Side with the mayor or with other conversations, that when Tolson was being developed and I was invited to some of those meetings when they were planning, and people had said to me at that time, this was some years ago, and I just arrived here, they were saying, there's been discussion about what happens if a school building closes and things like that. And I said back then, I said, we will always try to find the ability that we are all working to fill particular gaps and being in particular places and not at cross purposes with each other and not overlapping with each other and wasting resources. So my understanding of what's happening at Tolson is that a lot of those things are activity-driven, sports-driven, and then there would also be things potentially like financial literacy and English language learner classes and things like that. In the last kind of conversations I've heard about the direction that much of that is going. For us, our emphasis would be on what supports do we provide for families, things that our social workers and our counselors and our student services department provides a lot of supports are. If we could consolidate that to where a lot of that effort is happening from one location, and it's kind of a one-stop shop for a lot of those things that families may need supports with, whether that's our student services department or some of the other agencies or groups that we work with, then that would be able to support families in a different way from the variety of activities and things that might be offered at Tolson.
Now, and thinking, I have two things. I want to make sure I touch on pre-kindergarten, but in Tony's saying that, that the partners that go into the school now become part of school behavior. So one of the things that we're talking about is a house clinic, and so that's a little bit concerning to me because we've openly spoken to our constituents and said that we would never override what is, medical versus, needs. So you're talking about social needs, mental needs, that stuff, but not us stepping over and
Right, and
becoming a doctor or a
No.
physician or putting medical things into.
And these would not be us as a school district doing it. I mean,
Correct, but in a school building
these
that
would be
has-
services that
Mhm.
people would be able to come and access as they feel necessary and the need to access them, and making them, in some instances, more readily available for people than maybe having to travel someplace else to obtain.
But there's health clinics in the south side too, so yeah.
Would it be, that would be like a food pantry, where it'd be a food pantry there for the serve the community.
Yeah, we've had some employees say, well, my kids outgrow their clothes, what could we do with those, and what could we do? So we have people within the district that are willing to volunteer and do some things, and so then I know our social workers collect clothing and have closets and things in their buildings. But if there were a way to consolidate some of that and make that readily available within there, we could do that as well. And maybe that's an instance where we partner with some churches or other agencies to help make something like that available.
Yeah, what about the Elkhart Education Foundation? Are they interested in a portion of that, or?
We would have a conversation with all of our community partners as to make sense.
Now, how, with pre-K, this is a question that keeps coming up with pre-K, that's federally funded. So when that funding wears out, are we already preparing to be able to financially keep that going, or is
So
that?
our pre-K class, some of our pre-K classrooms, a few of them are Title I classrooms. So
Okay.
we're using Title I
So
grant
that
dollars
stays with us?
to run this, so those
Okay.
stay. And then the others are Head Start classrooms that
Okay.
we contract with Head Start that they run. And so in those instances, unless something drastic would happen and Head Start would go away, the issue that we're having currently is that we have issues of transportation and that Head Start just having difficulty staffing their classrooms. So I don't anticipate that the number of Head Start classrooms or our Title I classrooms would go away. And so then the question becomes, what other resources for Title I might there be? So there could be additional federal funding coming, depending on what happens if they break apart the Build Back Better bill that they've been talking about doing. The others is that, again, I've been in some conversations at the state level where there have been conversations about Indiana making more of a commitment itself to pre-K. We'll see what happens next year in the budget year if that develops. And then I've had some conversations in partnership with the DOE about how a site like this is something they would be interested in seeing if they could support. So again, these are all exploratory conversations. I haven't committed to anything, not knowing where we would be going and if the board was on board with this plan. But we could look at additional opportunities beyond what we currently have.
Does that require another administrative position over pre-K?
We have a pre-K coordinator currently.
Does that just follow?
It would go over there and be,
Okay.
at that time.
How about transportation? So, right now, aren't they almost all walk zone schools, or does Hawthorne have some busing?
Hawthorne has some busing.
Okay, and then, so, I know that it's not that much more of a distance to Roosevelt, but, so kids that normally could walk may be able to go up there if that's how they get districted. So, busing, is it going to increase our costs in busing because of this, and does that increase costs somewhere that isn't being taken in consideration?
So the way that,
Can you go up to the mic to make sure Doug can hear?
so based upon the way the south side is set up, we have 4 current elementary schools that are all within 1.2 miles of each other. That's the furthest distance from elementary to elementary. So the walk zone for Roosevelt currently stops at Benham, and so everything west of Benham is Hawthorne. So when you go over to Oakland is the line that where we begin busing. So it's all within those walk zones. However, then we have to bring into account the hazards. And Oakland Avenue does not have areas to cross everywhere, so that becomes what we deem a hazard for our students, so we bus beyond. So we don't anticipate that, for instance, creating any additional busing for us, because we can simply look at how, as we look at moving students around, Roosevelt is currently an all walk zone, Beck is, Monter is not, because they have some students that are east of the tracks by Hightley, and then we have the Oakland to the west. So we have some busing, but so far, just what we've looked at, we believe that we can just reallocate the current bus routes that we have in the buildings, and that we should not have an increased cost. But we have to get in. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's not set in stone. I can't tell you 100%. There won't be an increased cost, but at this point, the buses that we have available, we believe will be enough to support what we're doing.
Dr. Tarman, can you share the dates for those community meetings?
Yes.
So that if you guys want to come and participate or just get more information, that that's available.
Yes, so on February 2nd and 3rd at 6 o'clock, we will have, I'll do this same presentation and answer questions at 6 o'clock at Hawthorne itself. So February 2nd and 3rd, 6 o'clock at Hawthorne. February 9th at Roosevelt at 6 o'clock, and February 10th at 6 o'clock at Beck, Mary Beck.
Steve, I have a question. You know, a lot of this is all focusing on the repurposing part of Hawthorne, but what about how this is going to affect the education and improve the education of the students that we're moving into these other schools and the supports that are going to be there?
So our goal would be, by having a coordinated hub like this and maybe easing some of the burden on transportation, you know, for Head Start, and having it coordinated, hopefully Head Start can get their staffing back up where it needs to be, and we have conversations about best supporting our Title I pre-K teachers, that we strengthen this to a facility where all of that emphasis is making sure that students are getting ready for pre-K. So there's
I don't mean to interrupt you. That wasn't what I was referring to.
How are we getting them ready for education?
How are we? What are we doing to help the students who are moving? All the K-6 moving into potential different schools. What are we doing to focus on them and those needs?
So we'll be
and the needs of those schools.
Sure. So we'll be working with those building principals and determining what they need in terms of support, in terms of their staffing, and how we can help make sure that we get those staff members there. It's very important for us that we have staffing reallocated by the time we get to the end of the year, so that as we enter summer professional development opportunities, for guiding coalitions to get together, for teams to get together to look at science, to look at what they're doing with their math, to look at literacy, that those teams would be formed so that they can then do that work in those teams as they go through their summer PD. One of the questions, you know, regarding staffing is knowing that there are additional supports that are going to be needed in those buildings as their numbers go up. So could, you know, a nurse position be shared across buildings in addition to the nurses that are already there as we help with the transition? Same with social workers. So the goal would be for us to really have the conversation about which schools those students are reallocated to, what those principals feel like they have in place and under control, and then where do we need to move staff and look at that in terms of those pieces. And then it'll be really important for us to really have conversations around, and part of our focus this summer is on Tier 1 instruction and what do we do with all kids. And so the behavior piece of that and how do you build a sense of community in your classroom, that'll be really important as those new students come into those classrooms. So what kind of things can you do within your classroom to build that sense of community and build that sense of family and integrate those new students in there? That's some of the training that would be part of what we're doing in our professional development this summer, just in general, but it would be very important to make that available for those teachers as well.
Can you explain how the principals and the staff are going to be involved in this process?
So we initially had a meeting where we had the principals from buildings in this area and district staff all together to be able to just address questions and concerns that they had initially. We have another meeting scheduled for the end of this week where those principals will be coming back together, and we're going to specifically be looking at issues of class sizes, where have boundaries been before versus where they are now, what kind of things do we need to do in terms of looking at those boundaries, and what makes sense logistically for families. And they'll be very involved in helping look at those redistribution of students and particularly some people like Tracy at Beck and April who've been here a while and have been through these experiences before, their expertise is going to be very helpful as we look at this so that they can say, these are things that happened before. Let's make sure that we, look at this and make sure we're analyzing it all correctly as we go forward.
So one of the things that, as we spoke with many of the building principals, they suggested that they have a much better way of controlling a variety of things, but discipline is one thing when there's problems in a class, if they have at least 3 classrooms per grade. So am I to understand that by consolidating and using teachers or having teachers, select a new space, that could potentially give them the 3 sections there, which would be more ideal for, controlling a lot of things. But one being discipline. Is that one of our hopes? I'm assuming that's one of our hopes.
Several benefits to moving from, particularly like a situation at Beck, where there are just 2 sections at a grade level. So it's difficult to have a very rich professional learning community with just 2 people in there. They trade ideas and do those things, but again, having another person or 2 in the mix helps really to share ideas, and if somebody is having success, how do the other people on the team learn from that, and analyze the data and look at that, and then precisely because you'd be able to have additional sections to separate students out. So benefits would be instructionally, teachers being able to collaborate more, have more ideas, have the ability to learn more strategies and do the things that are necessary, and be able to do classroom management.
How do we help?
And I have to say, Tracy at Beck is very excited about getting back to those kind of levels.
For sure. How do we encourage our community to trust the process in trying to get smaller classrooms, more sections, more collaboration with this move? How are we going to? I know that through the community meetings, but there's a lot of people with a lot of big feelings because that was the pride of the South Side, and that's what we will hear over and over again, and it is true. And it is it's been built over decades and decades of great strength in that community, and that goes deep. The roots are super deep. So I just want to make sure that we continue to speak to that, speak to our community that has, that needs to feel regarded.
Ultimately, a building doesn't stand for that long without developing a legacy and a connection for people. So we have not lightly undertaken this conversation. But also, a building builds a legacy like that because of the people that are in it. So what I would be asking would be for the people that helped create that to be the same people that go forward and create it anew. That the regard that those teachers and staff have for those students would carry with them to another place and share that same sense of community and pride in a new setting. I know it does not, help when people have a connection to a place, and like I said, I fully appreciate that. And when I spoke with the Hawthorne staff on Friday, I felt it. I know it. But I trust, and I ask our families to trust, and I ask our community to trust that as we go forward and do this, it's those same people who built that there that now have the ability to establish it and carry it forward to more students and more broadly. And the other buildings, from the conversations I've had with those principals, are ready and willing to accept these students as Elkhart Community Schools students that we all have a responsibility for and that we're all committed to through our Elkhart process.
Yeah, I think over time and discussions, and I hope people do come to the community discussions so that your voice can be heard. I think it's going to be really important, and we do want to hear from you, and we do care deeply about this issue. So we just want you to know, please participate moving forward.
and being, no, you go ahead.
I just have a couple other questions. You know, we haven't really talked a lot, you've mentioned it, enrollment losses. But there's a cost to that I don't think people fully understand and realize how much money we're talking about. And so doing my data thing, the last 6 years, the number of students we have lost from an enrollment standpoint is been significant. You know, we're talking 1,300 students. Multiply that times an average of $6,500, and you're looking at over $8 million that we've lost. That's real money that could be going to support, staff, and other things. There's another piece that I don't know if many of you are aware of. I know I've sent information to the board. The transfer report. The state released the transfer report, and we have 2,200 people that live in our school district that have chosen not to attend our school district. That's real money, and that's just this year's money that is going to other school districts. That number is to the tune of $12 to $14 million that could be in our school district if those students were here. So I think that's a conversation piece when we're talking about finances and closing buildings, repurposing buildings, that people need to understand. And we as a board and as a district need to be focusing on why are they leaving? How are we going? What are we doing to do things to help get them to come back or have programs and things that they want to come here? Because we're in a situation now that we're having to make really tough decisions. And nobody likes them, but it is what it is. And we've been given a gift from the federal government with Easter money. So as somebody told me the other day, that's like a bridge loan. So that's giving us time to be able to pay for some things, to get some things in place, curriculum pieces, support pieces, and to do things so that we can get our house in order to be able to do these things. You know, I think that these are really tough decisions, but we have to look at it from a financial standpoint as well as an education standpoint. We're in the business of educating kids, and we need to be educating our kids. That's our number one priority, and making sure we're doing it in a fiscally responsible, intentional way. And we also have capacity issues. You alluded to the feasibility study. You know, we have a capacity based on the information that was in our board book of about 15,000 students for our district that our buildings can hold. And we've got capacity to approve about 3,800 more. So when you do the math, that is a number of school buildings that could be closing. And so we need to be very intentional with the decisions we make on what we're doing to improve our outcomes, how we're using our resources with our staff, with our students, and with our building. And I think it's kind of, you got to connect all the dots. And so it's why we're talking about Hawthorne today. Hawthorne isn't the only problem. I shouldn't say problem. Hawthorne isn't the only issue we have. It's one issue that we're trying to deal with from a building standpoint and how to allocate those resources and reallocate resources to help save some money and do some other things that could be beneficial. But we have a lot of other areas where we need to focus on and do some due diligence to make sure that we are using our resources widely from what we have, and being able to look at things and being able to attract students instead of having our people who live in our district go to our schools that are in our county and who are reaping the benefits. So they're farming our students, and we need to stop that. We need to figure out what we're doing and be very intentional so that we don't have this problem and we can turn the tide.
And that, saying on that, you know, moving students without us having education in place. And I know that we are backed up against the wall in many different areas with testing, which is very unfair, especially with what we're walking into right now in this session of elementary school. It's unfair. We're taking the ability of our teachers and their vast skill of being able to educate, and we're going to bog them down with all these tests. And I know there's sometimes that we can't do anything about that, but I still think that we rethink what testing is really necessary and how much duplicate testing that we're doing, at what cost, at the cost of wearing out our teachers and at the cost of loss of education with our children. So when we repurpose this building, I don't want to get distracted with the community hub. I want us to say, okay, we got in this situation and now we have a call where we've wanted to right the ships, we've wanted to get our education. That is our number one priority. We can't fear a charter school, we can't fear anything else. We have to dig deep into the roots of all of the love of our buildings and how each of our buildings feel about it, and get to what we're here in the business for, and that's education. And I'm nervous about the distraction of this, and I want to be dug into educating our students, because when we thrive there, and we've got multiple schools doing it, many on the cusp of doing it, and by all means, the staff at Hawthorne was, is, and always has been doing it. We need to educate the kids and not get all wrapped up and constantly distracted in the school system. And moving the kids means educating the children.
You know, change is hard. But it's not the first time that this corporation has had to look at closing a building to make sure that the students within our corporation are best served. I can think of 4 buildings that have been closed right off the top of my head. Weston Elementary School, the school that I attended when I was in elementary school. Lincoln, the school that my father attended. Rice and Samuel Strong. All have been closed because of the changing needs of our community. This is just another one. And when you have a building that is 93 years old, it is just not sustainable forever. So we have to do what's best for the students and keep that in mind at all times, because as Mrs. Mullins so adequately said, education is our priority. So as long as we're keeping the kids in the forefront and what is best for them, the rest of it will all work out.
Yeah, I have a comment kind of following up to what Rocky said there. You know, Hawthorne Elementary is kind of like Betty White. You know, she's not going to be around forever. And one of the tough things to do out there is to accept change. And the one constant throughout the entire universe is one word. It's called change. And so we have to, when those times of change come, we have to do the best for our kids, for the school corporation, for our staff, and move forward in an efficient manner. So thank you.
Anybody else have any comments? No. All right. I guess we'll take a short break before we start the executive session.
The public meeting.
I mean, yeah, public meeting, sorry.
You'll get it in about 25 weeks.
Yeah, letter share.
I thought we were.
You can share the file.
Yeah, you do.
Excuse me, if this entity is over for you.
Oh, yeah.
Wherever you're gonna get coffee. Transition plan, Hawthorne School is My grandfather, they were going to condemn his truck. Hawthorne School took their program. I know what my granddad was like. I think one of the reasons rose back in Hawthorne.
I know.
Our operations director would maybe be able to help you direct where that. Okay. Okay, thanks.
I don't know.
Her presentation, she emailed it and shared it with me.
Yeah,
Following
actually,
up on here.
if you wouldn't mind, that'd be easy, yeah.
I had just got ready to close out and I noticed it popped up on my email.
Right.
So I was like, wait a minute. I can do it.
Good job, Tom.
Is Bill connected?
Yes, he is. Okay.
If everybody wants to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Make sure you have fun.
The LCAR promise. Every student is known by name, challenged, and supported by highly effective staff, and in partnership with the community, will graduate career and college ready and life ready.
So there is an invitation to speak. You guys will have an opportunity at the end of the meeting. There is a half-sheet white paper that you need to fill out and give to Dora. You'll have 3 minutes. You need to put your name, your address, and your relationship to the district. So we have a moment of pride.
Hello, my name is Portia Kimberly. I'm a senior at Elkhart High School, and I want to talk to you guys about the Winter Carnival that just happened this past weekend. It's an NHS project that we did with the National Honor Society. We do a service project every year, and we decided to do a Winter Carnival for our community and for our students. So on this slideshow, it's just going to be a whole bunch of pictures of what we had to do this year. Honestly, this project was very beneficial for everyone in our group because we had to learn different parts of how to run a Winter Carnival. Our teachers didn't do it for us. They told us that it was something that we were going to have to figure out on our own, and they would guide us. So it really helped us a lot, and it turned out really well. So a lot of things that we learned was contacting businesses. I feel like this was super important because as students, we had to learn how to communicate with others. Sometimes we forget how to do that. So we had to contact business partners and people to come out and support us. So some people that we also contacted was our own students at our school, like JRTC. They had a fundraiser going on, and I'm pretty sure Farmers of America did too. And so they came out and supported us. We also had to work with our staff, so we had to talk to the staffing at the freshman division, our janitors, and get supplies from them, teachers to come out and support us, and honestly just work together. We had to work on advertising, which is using our social media, our school social media, and also just posting flyers around our school. We also sent a whole bunch of things to our elementary schools to come out and check it out. Also leadership. We had a lot of different leaders for each committee. We had like a logistics committee, which was to basically plan the whole entire event, figure out the little details that we need, food that we would need, games that we were going to set up, kingdom bouncers, talking to them. And we also had to work together. So each committee had to ask for help and talk to each other to plan this out. We had to take inventory of what we did have and what we didn't have, which was very helpful with the game. For example, we were going to do a cornhole game, and we thought we had to bring our own cornhole, but Central or the freshman division already had some, so we used theirs. So that was a great example of that. The big thing was budgeting and accounting, what money that we needed to spend, what we had, and then what we wanted to make back from it for our teacher appreciation week. So there's some teachers here that decided to come out and help us and let us pie them for our event, which we really appreciated. Just honestly, the teamwork that we had was super beneficial, and I feel like that's what NHS is about. It's about not only working for your community and giving back without getting anything in return, but also just being involved and working with each other. And so just being there with all the kids and coming out and actually seeing kids come and play our games and being super excited. I remember I was so excited to see the lion, and he ran up to him and gave him a big hug, and everyone was so happy. Don't think you can click on that link.
I would be glad to.
I don't know, I'm actually signing in.
I don't have access.
Oh, you don't?
I'm not special enough.
That's for my classes. I can just take it.
Here.
It was just. Oh, that's just my email.
That bad, I saw the, our lion mascot predominantly, in the slide, so.
I'm so
I
excited.
know you're a big fan.
I love that guy. And it used to be everywhere, every club, just going and spreading the love. Casey's he or she happens to be listening. Got you.
Like I said, NHS is a really good group to be a part of. It's one of the groups that Elkhart High School offers. We offer a lot of different things. But it's fun to get involved with the school. Like student government is another one that I'm a part of. And we get to plan events and you kind of just learn how to do all of that. So like at first we thought it was gonna be super easy to throw a carnival and realized that that's not how that works. Like the teachers make it look really easy when they do events. We had to do food, we had to do all types of stuff.
I know, right?
I know that all the kids in NHS were really grateful, and we had a meeting and talked about how appreciative we were from this experience with the event, because we learned how to be better communicators, especially now. I feel like we haven't been able to do that much. It's just like planning and working together. So having fun. I thought it'd be great for you guys to see the interaction that we had.
What was your biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge was just like planning it all. Like when we were there and we got everything set up, it felt more real. When it was like, okay, people are about to start coming in, it was like scary because we didn't know if we were gonna like, people were gonna enjoy it. Did we forget something? Are we gonna run out of food? Like we were like super nervous, but I think with our teachers guiding us and answering questions, it was super helpful.
What did you guys do with the money from the carnival?
So the money that we obviously had to pay back some of the money, from like what we needed for the bounce houses, but the money is going into an account, and that is going to Teacher Appreciation Week, which we do I think around May or April, where we basically choose what we want to do for our teachers, and then we spend the money through that week, and we give back to them and say thank you for everything that you guys do for us. So that's kind of like our fundraiser for them, and then we also just do community service for like the school or for our community. We go out and stuff like that. But that fundraiser was for our teachers. And
So what advice would you give to the next committee that wants to maybe do the same thing next year?
I would say, well, for us, we had two options. It was either a dance or this. I think the carnival was a great way to interact with kids. Like our elementary schools, a lot of them came out and we got to meet them and talk to them and see them. And so I would definitely say don't be afraid to communicate with your community, because at least with this group, that's what it was about. It was about talking to them and meeting them, and also just being willing to give back without expecting anything. Like we weren't like expecting community service hours. This was our project that we wanted to do to raise money for our teachers. So it was something that you just have to be open to trying new things and know that you don't always have to get something in return.
I think that's great advice to your successors.
And one of your high school teachers brought her students, which is also elementary students.
Yeah.
And from what I heard from them, they had an absolute blast, and like are so excited about it happening again. And according to the mother of those children, they slept very well.
That was kind of where
You know, so it worked. It was successful.
Yeah,
It
there
was
wasn't
very
an event
successful.
going on, so it was a great time for them to come
coolest thing is to see how many teachers brought their kids that have, you know,
Yeah.
students in the district that thought it was so awesome. You did such a, and we got to go last year and it was great, but this year, man, you guys blew it out of the park. You did a great job.
Yes, the bouncy houses were definitely the fan favorite. Like, they loved them. I even wanted to go in them. I was so happy.
Good. Everybody should have a bouncy. Congratulations.
Thank
You
you.
guys did a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Georgia.
Portia, can you tell us, what are your future plans?
Me personally, I want to be an ENT and a police officer. That's where I'm going into. So I'm actually at the hub of Health and Public Safety, that's my hub this year. And so just this past year at the Career Center and in my hub, just getting ready to go into that field, talking about college and just planning my classes accordingly to that field.
Do me a favor.
Yeah.
Tell your dad Rocky said hi.
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great job.
We have our consent item.
Move to approve.
Second?
Motion passes. Is there any discussion?
We have one gift, and it is a donation of $1,000 to the high school boys track program from Cressy and Everett, Real Estate, Scott Hammondtree. So thank you very much for that.
Also, we are approving in the consent items a fundraiser that the young adult program is doing. As you all may recall, they came and spoke to us a couple months ago, and I asked them to sell me some of their coffee that they are doing that went under my Christmas tree at my office. And my clients loved that coffee. I mean, they really did, to the point where I now have them coming and saying, can you get us more of this coffee?
You're the coffee guy now?
I'm now the coffee guy, yes. It's a sideline from the other business.
So many.
I'm a coffee dealer.
Good, we'll see you on a State Farm commercial. You and Aaron.
No, they only take handsome people. But I have had the opportunity to twice go to the young adult program, and I can tell you, when you walk in that room, the excitement and the sense of accomplishment and pride from these students is palpable. It is incredible. They are just thrilled to be there and to tell us, you know, any visitors, what they are doing and stuff and what they're being able to do. So anything that we can do to support this program, whether it be a fundraiser or anything else, has my 100% support.
Is there any other discussion? All right. Dr. Cohen? Oh, cause Doug isn't here, I forgot.
Start with Rocky and Phil.
Aye?
Foley.
Aye.
Ellie Mullins. Aye. Ann Vondervellen.
Aye.
Doug Weaver.
Aye.
And Troy Scott.
Aye.
Forgot me.
Stacy.
Aye.
All right, under old business, board members in front of you, as I provide you weekly, these are the update of our COVID cases. This week so far, we are fairly high. Those numbers in the upper right-hand corner and the 34 staff positives there are as of noon today. This has put us in the position where between COVID absences, exposures, and people out for other reasons, that the freshman division did move to virtual for the remainder of the week. We have some other buildings, Cleveland, Pierre, Moran, North Side. Are there any others? Those are kind of the three that I saw in this information from Maggie this morning that were very high. So we're watching them to see what may have to happen on Thursday coming out of our e-learning day tomorrow. So letting you know that may be impacting more buildings, that we may have to go virtual for the end of the week and then see where we are Monday.
Any discussion? All right, Doug, you're up.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. In new business, tonight the administration is bringing for initial consideration proposed revisions to Administrative Regulation KI. This is the form that is filled out by staff members and student groups related to fundraisers. We are still engaged in a few discussions, both with the business office as well as student activities, about making some additional revisions to this policy, which will likely be seen either the first meeting of February or the second meeting of February, as we continue to try and bring this regulation up to date and also look at options that might be available for online donations. Should be able to work that particular issue out with the business office in a way that we know will meet the requirements of the State Board of Accounts and our Chief Financial Officer comfortable. But certainly if there are suggestions the board might have related to revisions to that, I'd be happy to discuss those with you, or you can contact me at a later date.
Is there any discussion? Second.
Good evening. Thank you, Doug, for being my warm-up act. So bear with me, I have a number of items that we need to work through this evening. The first item of business relates to issuance of bonds in 2022. These are for projects at Daly and Monder. You've heard us talk about that a little bit before. We are already doing some ESSER-related HVAC work at Daly. That is about $3.7 million. This bond issue will take it a step further and give Daly very much a facelift. Touch lots of areas within that. So tonight, the action is approving the issuance of bonds, setting the hearing date. We're going to have a hearing on March 8th at the regular meeting at 7 o'clock. The bonds are in the face amount of $5,815,000. So with that, Madam President, I would ask for approval of the resolution as presented.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and second. Is there any discussion?
What was the bond amount?
$5,815,000 for each building. So those will be series 2022A and B.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion?
Trustees,
Aye.
Babette Bowen.
Aye.
Kelly Mullins. Aye. Ann Vanderbilt.
Aye.
Doug Weaver.
Aye.
Troy Scott.
Aye.
And Stacy Jacobs.
Aye.
Great, thank you. The next item then is approval of the First Amendment to the installation contracts. This allows us to do the work and commit to all the materials with the long lead time. We're very pleased with how the pricing has come in. This delivery method has allowed us to kind of get ahead of the game a little bit, so we are several $100,000 ahead of what we had expected, so good news. So Madam President, I would ask for approval of the First Amendment to the installation contract as well as the performance guarantee.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Motion passes. Is there any discussion?
Rocky Anfield.
Aye.
Babette Bowen.
Aye.
Kelly Mullins. Aye. Ann Vanderbilt.
Aye.
Doug Weaver.
Aye.
Troy Scott.
Aye.
And Stacy Jacobs.
Aye.
Okay, the next item, completely different topic, relates to 401A plans. And much like Neola, for Neola, the state legislature passes new laws that causes changes in language in our policies. Those happen. The IRS does this on a 6-year cycle. So it's just cycle 3 restatement of our plans. There's no significant changes. We don't currently contribute to those plans. So that, Madam President, I would ask for approval of this.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion passes. Is there any discussion?
Rob Canfield,
Aye.
Annabeth Bowling,
Aye.
Kelly Mullins,
Aye.
Deanne Zondervan,
Aye.
Doug Weaver,
Aye.
Troy Scott,
Aye.
and Casey Hughes.
Aye.
Okay, next up, financial report. It's my pleasure to present that the December 2021 cash balance ended at $45,363,008.36. That is the high water mark since I've been here. As you can see in your couple of pages behind that, your education fund and operations fund, they both saw significant growth in cash balance. Education fund, actually the first CARES money, the first ESSER program helped us in that regard. We did pay a number of regular ed teachers out of that fund, and so it allowed us to build some cash balance in the education fund. With that concludes my comments on the financial report. Are there any questions? The next item is informational only. As you recall, at the end of the year, I asked for permission to do this code-required transfer of appropriations. It doesn't move any actual expense. It just moves appropriation dollars so that there's no negative balances in any particular account line. So this is the result. This is actually quite a few less dollars moving than in prior years. Simply a software program that we run against our account file. And then finally, the insurance report. December's actual claim experience was an improvement over November. The thing I look at particularly is the claims versus expected line. If you look at year to date, we were still $850,000 lower than the expected claim costs. However, it was 1.1% higher than the premium equivalent, so it did, our claim experience in 21 actually did eat into our cash balance a little bit, but certainly a good move as we move into 22 and move to Anthem. So we should see some improved results. So that concludes my comments on the insurance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug?
Donald was his opening act on his closing act. Tonight, the administration is presenting for your consideration some further revisions to the board meeting schedule for 2022. These were first presented to the board on November the 9th and then approved by the board on the 28th of November. But upon further review, we recognized that the dates that were first approved for the month of June were for the first and the third Tuesday. And as you know, our board meetings typically are on the second and the fourth Tuesday, so we are seeking your approval of those changes this evening.
Is there a motion?
We'll be moving from the 7th of June and the 21st of June to the 14th and 20th.
So it is reflected.
Yes, it is reflected in what you have before you tonight, as opposed to what was presented to you back on the 23rd.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
You can second.
No.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Motion passed.
Rob Canfield,
Aye.
Annabeth Bowling,
Aye.
Kelly Mullins, Deanne Zondervan,
Aye.
Doug Weaver,
Aye.
Troy Scott,
Aye.
and Casey Davis.
Aye.
Thank you.
Is there any comments from the audience that want to speak? Julie? If you don't have
I can do it.
Okay. Oh. Julie?
I'm going to read straight from my phone because I'm a terrible speaker on the spot. So those who don't know, it is School Board Appreciation Month, and so I just wanted to say a couple words. In this current climate of ever-evolving entitlement and uncivil discourse, it becomes increasingly difficult to try to teach one another about a cornerstone of a successful, thriving society, which is service to others.
We want to thank the members of this board for your service to our community, our schools, and most importantly, our children. Nowadays, there are not many positions available more thankless than those on a public school board. Through all the attacks on public education from legislators, seemingly never-ending criticism from the public regarding your performance and change, the only consistent quality about your job. You're still here in your best attempts to help the kids of Elkhart. While we may not always agree with every decision, we appreciate that the genesis of those resolutions is rooted in what you believe to be the best interest of our school system and the greater good. I've witnessed every single member talk to their constituents, staff, and community. We appreciate you and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You could have 6 minutes.
Dr. Cohen,
I have nothing.
the board, you guys have any other comments?
I do. I want to just thank Aaron Mishler for his care and concern about our health and the health of our district, and his thoughtful letter to have us continue to care for others by doing all that we can, testing, mask wearing if you're sick, and making sure that we're trying to keep the hospital numbers down, which are currently soaring. I wanted to say thank you for that. I also wanted to encourage our community to come and be a part of the conversation, and not the community that does nothing but just is out there complaining and not being solution oriented. We are looking for your involvement, and we are looking for community-wide solutions that feel good to all of us, while we also remain very fiscally responsible to my colleague, who I love dearly over here, who always keeps us on track for that. So that's all I have to say.
All right, meeting adjourned.
What?
It's over, Doug. You can hang up.
No, I had a comment.